Matt, I was thinking about the Nordic countries and the Nordic model, which essentially was a partnership approach between the private sector and the public sector and the not-for-profits, but it's about 100 years ago, setting an agenda to build prosperity together. Some of the ideas were really good at the time, but the challenges today are completely different. Is there a role for the Nordic City Network as an arena to be driving a new Nordic model? Could that help us to drive leadership towards some of these targets?
Yes, first of all, yes.
Hjalmar.
Exactly, and then we'll call Hjalmar. That's actually a very good plan. No, but jokes aside, yes, I think there is a role. But I think you asked actually very many questions in one, so I'll try to break them down a little bit. And first of all, I think that when answering the question, where is the leadership in the climate change issues, I think that we have to be very acutely aware that it's not consensus. We are not all in agreement on the SDGs. I think we have to face that, we have to realize that, because in a conference like this, I think we are in agreement. We do see the importance and we have ahead of ourselves in sort of linked into the SDGs. But there are other people out there, there are other politicians, there are other civil servant values and other quicker responses and rewards. And I think this is very, very important to see, because we have to take that leadership, all of us. We have to do it from the politics side, definitely. And those of us who think that these are the most important issues because without them all the others fail, have to drive that in every aspect of everything that we do. And we have to use every means we have, because we don't have time to wait until everyone is in agreement. We just have to push these issues all the time. But I think that this is a task for all of us. We see now, the business sector really coming forward, I think, in Sweden, and wanting to play a part in this. They do that partly, I'm sure, for altruistic reasons, but also because there has been a real threat towards their business model today. And when you see a threat to a business model, that is when you start to differentiate, that is when you start to develop your business model, that is when you try to find new ways of making money in a company. In the same way, when we look at the citizens, take solar energy, for example. We have a very clear incentive in installing solar energy, because there is also a very good upside to your private economy and the cost you have for heating or for energy. I think that we have to find all of those drivers. It doesn't matter why people work towards the global agenda. It doesn't matter. They can have any motives they want, as long as we go in the same direction. So I think we have to find alliances in every aspect of society, and we have to find the motives that drive this sector in that direction, this sector here, and we have to combine them. We have to just realize that we don't have time for everyone to be orthodox environmentalists. We have to just make sure that any motive is okay as long as we go in the same direction, as long as we can start to neutralize the impact that we have on the planetary boundaries, as long as we can build a society that is sustainable and that we can actually hand over to our children, that is fine. And those alliances, that's where every single one of us needs to take that leadership, to find those alliances, to find those motives, to find the drivers, to make sure that we all move in the right direction.
And do you think Nordic City Network is positioned to be an arena to find new ways of working around that?
I absolutely do. I think Nordic City Network is is one part where we can learn from what we are doing in our cities, but also see what others are testing, and that's also gaining the courage to test ourselves. Because I think the courage to fail will be absolutely essential to our ability to actually reach the goals. If we are too afraid to fail, then we will stop trying. And if the only thing that we can be absolutely 100% sure of is that the political agenda and the ways that we have been working for the past 100 years will not solve this problem. We have to find new ways. We have to find new alliances. We have to find new ways and new business models and a new context. Otherwise, we will not move forward at all. So we need to be courageous. We need to try. We need to test, and then we also need to fail, because that's what you do. If you try, you will fail sometimes. But that's the only way of learning what we need to do and what we can't do. So if we can inspire each other in these networks, in all of the networks that are represented here in this conference, if we can inspire each other to be courageous, to test, to try, to fail, to learn, to then succeed, that's I think the only way that we can actually find the solutions that we so badly need.
We were talking before about political bravery, and I think you've got a good demonstration of it there, a political understanding of the need to be pushing the boundaries and to accept that not every time we're going to be hitting the targets, but if we don't try, we're not going to make it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Krista, I think for your role as Director of Planning in the City of Malmo, working with the SDGs in a structured way within the city, is it just a nice way of packaging, or is it actually going to be a real tool for change and a real driver for development within the city?
Well, we have been quite true to the Brundtland Commission. We have worked with the Brundtland definition of sustainability for many, many years. And our comprehensive plan has been organized that way since 2000, I think. But today we give the new perspective from the global goals, the 17, and that's quite interesting because it's much more complex than the 3 parameters that you say. Now we have 17, and if many things happen in between, there will be a lot of possibilities really in this. But I also believe that we have to adopt the global goals and take them into consideration into the normal management of the office and the city as a whole, I would say. So not creating any new systems that has to be followed up and creating new bureaucracy and so on. So our idea in the city of Malmo is now to take the global goals into the normal budget process. So it will be a part of the normal management of the city, and I think that's the secret to do that.
And will it help get a more joined up approach, or?
Yeah, in a way you can say so, and I also believe that the global goals themselves is a kind of tool to communicate with the business sector, but also all the departments in Malmö. We have something that we can share, and I think that's one of the big possibilities with the global goals, that we will have a tool that could interpret and be a toolbox to discuss. And not only in the city, but the business sector and even the inhabitants maybe.
David, I was going to throw over to you. You're working a lot with sort of mobilising skills and mobilising knowledge and to deal with challenges at the city level. What experience have you got from that work that you could see as part of that a transformative process? Because we're talking about achieving a lot in a short space of time. How do we do that?
I'd like to start by venting a frustration, because if you go through the 17 global goals, then I don't know what anyone could disagree with. I mean, the English phrase is mother than apple pie. I mean, what city worth its salt has not been trying to do this throughout its history. Create housing for everyone, create employment for everyone, deal with sustainability, deal with water quality and so on. It's what we should all be doing as a city. And my frustration is that when you have that conversation in forums such as this, the next bit is, oh God, this is really, really complicated. And we need to have multi-agency cooperation, we need to have partnership, and we need to have innovative partner, all this stuff. And what frustrates me is that complexity is self-created. A lot of the complexity we have to deal with is stuff that we create ourselves. It's the way that we manage our cities. I mean, cities are complex places, but actually what's really complicated is the way that we stick stuff in silos and the way that we manage stuff in such a way that makes it so difficult for different things to link up and to coordinate. And so it seems to me that this shouldn't be that difficult. And what we need to do is focus on actually doing stuff as opposed to talking about it. And so partnerships are only useful if they're actually action orientated, and I'm very interested in what happens on the ground. And as someone earlier said, it's perhaps because I'm a practitioner. You know, I expect to see stuff happen. I'm not satisfied with just talking about it.
Yeah. And so, you pull teams of people together to actually help get things happen.
Yeah, I mean, let me just say a couple of words about the Academy of Urbanism. I'm chair of the Academy of Urbanism, which is based in the UK but has an international reach. And one of the things that we do is we give awards each year for towns, cities, places, neighbourhoods, and so on. And the cities we give awards to are across the whole of Europe. And when we do that, there's a couple of things that we learn. The first is that the cities in the UK don't really stand up to comparison with cities that we go across Europe. So, you know, the best cities in the UK are much better than they used to be, but are still not quite as good as they were. And the second thing that we learn is that we in the UK are forever trying to do things properly. We're trying to consult everyone, we're trying to have partnerships and so on, and in doing so we're making life really difficult for ourselves. And so we had a conversation not so long ago with a Dutch city, and the planners of the Dutch city were saying, well, we consult, obviously when we're doing a plan, we consult widely on the plan, and once we've got the plan, we don't consult anymore because people have agreed the plan, and now the time is to go and do it. In the UK, we consult on the plan, we consult on the implementation, we consult on the review of the plan, we consult endlessly. And of course, if you consult endlessly, people end up just disagreeing with each other. And you end up without consensus, you end up with conflicts. The second thing we've learned, and this slightly goes against some of the ideas of partnership, is that the cities that do really well have strong mayors. And as a result of that, the UK has introduced the idea of mayors. We now have elected mayors that we didn't before with a long term and so on. Because it's not always about partnership, sometimes it's about being entrepreneurial, being prepared to actually go out and do something as opposed to just talk about it. And actually that process by which cities get things done I think is very interesting. And cities are complex systems, I'm not pretending it's easy, but actually it's about controlling complex systems, and that's about finding the right levers, it's about finding ways that make things change quite rapidly. And if you get that right, then you can change things very quickly. And that's what I'm interested in us doing.
You wanted to come back on the complexity issue, I think?
No, I agree on the complexity issue, actually, that it should be and could be and have to be a lot simpler than we make it sound at times. But I shouldn't take up too much time here, but I just want to be very clear that there is not a complete consensus about the SDGs. If we look at the two examples that you gave, housing for everyone, that's not a given. In a politically run organization, that is not an absolute truth. Housing for those who can pay, and if we don't do anything, maybe the others will move away. That is part of the actual debate in Malmo. That is why we have the projects that you have been visiting. That is why we discuss the issues that we have in Sofielund, and that is why we discuss the issues in Lindängen. Because there are people who actually think that if we don't provide housing, then maybe poor people will actually just move to another community. Clean air, of course, as long as it doesn't affect my car. Everyone wants clean air, but don't try to shut off the center of the city, because they don't really take that. Everyone would sign that children, 3 years old with their lungs that are not fully developed should have clean air, but not if it affects the way I can move by car. then all of a sudden the priority of that is bigger. Even within our organization is working very actively with the SDGs, but still, we say that we need to fly less because we have the pollution from the air industry, but only unless it means that I will lose 1 hour on that travel time. Then I have to fly anyway because my time is so important. We have to fly. So these are actual. I think this is. I've been thinking about this for the past few years. That we always are. We are so much in agreement, but then when we come back to reality, it's but that decision that would cost 1 million crowns more. So let's go with a less good solution. And that is why, if we talk about leadership, that is why the bravery is needed. Because we need to challenge that. We need to challenge that our time is so important as politicians, as civil servants, that we can't actually spend 2 more hours on a trip and go by train. Because if the trip is important enough to do, maybe it's important enough to also spend 2 more hours on, if it means that we are 2 tons less of CO2. And if we want to have a clean energy solution for Malmo, then maybe it's worth installing that solar cell panel, even if it means that you will have a maintenance cost that increases by 2% or 3%. Maybe it's worth it. So this is, again, if we want to talk about leadership, it's not in the consensus. The consensus part, that's the easy. That it's easy to lead when everyone is in agreement. But if we want to lead, and again, that's not just up to politicians, it's to all of us, then we have to have the courage to lead also when we are in disagreement. And we have to take all those fights, all those debates. Otherwise, 2030 is very, very close and we will not reach it.
So there's a complexity in one level of when you're getting down into the dirty business of delivering on the ground.
Complexity maybe is in the fact that we're not in agreement ever.
I think for Anna, we were talking before about the issue of the risk of talking and networking and sharing experience and all the rest of it being very good and very positive, but does it lead to delivery on the ground? You've been active with the Union of Baltic Cities for a number of years from your role in heading up sustainability in the city of Malmo. What's your feeling around that? Is networking delivering, or is it just about a nice trip over to Riga or to Estonia and looking at some interesting projects and reflecting? What does it actually give? What does it actually achieve?
I think it gives a lot for those who want to cooperate with other cities. And I also think it's important in this a little bit cold days when nations couldn't cooperate as much as we want, then cities can do it still. And I think that's very important because Union of Baltic Cities is working quite practical cooperation between environmentalists and urban planners and trying to do projects together and create values together. We also have, I'm one of the co-chairs in a commission for sustainable cities, but we also have a commission for planners, urban planners, and we often do things together with them. And we have projects where there's not any European funding involved, but where cities involve people from other cities around the Baltic Sea to cooperate and help them with city planning. And I think those kind of concepts is very valuable, where you can work together and solve practical problems or practical issues in the cities. And just to give an example, we in the commission where I'm active, we have, the last meeting was in St. Petersburg. I couldn't be there, but that was a month ago. And I think that says something about the need of having good relations in the Baltic areas and talk to each other about how do we do when we want to implement the sustainable development goals on local level. I fully agree with Marta as well that sustainable development couldn't be something only for those who can afford it in the city planning process. It has to be reality for everyone in different kinds of contexts.
I think there was a lot of challenges, I know, in the Baltic Sea around sewage-related pollution and things like that. Is it the experience of the kind of the Scandinavian, former Soviet states, and the German experience in that, has that helped deliver through the networking process? Has that helped deliver change?
Yes, it has. After like 20 years ago, there was a lot of cooperation between those who work with waste and sewage treatment in Scandinavia and Eastern countries, and it was very much city to city. I think Malmo helped Klaipeda to build a new sewage treatment plant, for example. So yes, it is.
Because that it was an interesting time in the post-Soviet era there, similar to the kind of technology transfer processes that we're talking about now on a global perspective around the SDGs. And I guess there could be some lessons to be learned from that as well.
Yeah. Prevo and I have been involved in European application newly between E.ON, that we work a lot with, our energy company in Malmo, and the city of Malmo, and a city in Romania. And that's about having a new generation of district heating, you could say, built on much cheaper technology than we have today. And that could be an important thing for us in Malmo, but it could also be an even more important thing for other cities, if that kind of technology could be delivered and implemented. So that's a good example, I think, on that we need also new technologies to meet the challenges with the SDGs in the future.
Christy, you wanted to respond? And then
well, I think there's something contradiction between built into the global goals, because they are negotiated and agreed at the global level, but they don't have the tools to get it happen. And I think that as we are discussing, it's the cities that will make it, because the cities are much more flexible, faster, more adaptive, and so on. But that also means that the global level has to give away some power to the cities. And the question is if they will do that.
the global level or the national level?
Well, both, I would say.
Both.
Yeah.
We'll come to you shortly, Perona. Michel, say it's the 51st INTA World Urban Congress. It's 2028. You're looking back at all the successes of INTA being a key player in meeting the Sustainable Development Goals and meeting the Paris climate targets, living up to the new urban agenda. How do we get there from where we are now?
I would say that you will have to trust the robots. They will be there to replace us, Secretary General, President, and so on. That will happen. By the time, that will be no more Secretary Generals, but just robots. It's not that I don't have a vision for so long horizon. I think we have discussed already the 2 days that above or beyond 5 years. 5 years is not serious to introduce any forecasting, because the world is changing so fast that we cannot predict what will happen. We had an example, I quote it again, that 10 years ago the smartphone did not exist, and the smartphone changed our way of life in 10 years. So what will be the next progress? What will be the next breakthrough innovation that will change totally the way we look at the city? So basically what hopefully will not change is the people, that the people still need to live, say, 60, 70, 80, 90 years. We are living, aging population is increasing. So therefore we have to satisfy the need of this population. And the question is, what are the instruments that we have to do it? So let's concentrate, I want to concentrate my remarks on the tools that we have. I like very much the sentence that the change will go through the networking process. I would say that's not enough. Networking process is just a tool, another instrument. It will certainly be through the partnership process between networks. And I would like to discuss how this partnership process can be established between the networks in order to achieve. The discussion about the motive, the leadership, aspiration, I agree totally. We at INTA, we agree totally with that. And we cooperate and we start not to take leadership positions, but to start an intelligent follow-up positions and providing enough resources. My concern is that my real concern is that I don't see any progress in advancing the debate on the future of urban development. We are losing networks. One of the networks, one of the oldest networks, is not in a position to help us, to guide us, which has been doing for many years. I know them given, but people will recognize the different networks I'm talking about. I'm more concerned about its survival than about producing new knowledge. And we need new knowledge. We need to share new knowledge. We need to have to share the experiences collected by the networks and put it in a way that would be useful to the different cities, different key players, and so on. My concern is that despite the fact that some institutions are disappearing, that means the reductions of the spaces for debate and integrated kind of approaches to the city, not vertical or purely instrumental silos association, in that the private sector is taking over the field of the integrated debate by creating its own networks, defending, presenting its own economic interests, and occupying the floor at the expenses of the traditional associations, which are less equipped, less doted in resources. I can give you a lot of examples that is taking place. And this is a kind of, it put us in a dangerous situation, because then where is our freedom? Where is our autonomy? How can we think so freely as Martha to say, I totally disagree with SDGs, when merging with the SDGs is becoming the fashionable, is becoming political correct. You are totally political and correct if you disagree with SDGs, so congratulations to you, or welcome to the club. The second aspect is that my concern is about universities. They pretend to know everything, and then they are, no, serious, absolutely serious. And they are occupying the field at the expenses of the practitioners. And if you don't do it according to how university conceive it's the right way to do things, you are not frequentable persons. You are not quoted in the technical journals. Nobody came to your meetings because they are not scientific. And it's exactly the debate we had yesterday. We are living in a situation where every position is a false position. It's purely personal, professional interest. It's nothing to do for the general interest of it changing.
So what you're describing is a fairly defensive world and quite fragmented.
The world is fragmented, defensive. I'm not defensive. I'm just attacking in the sense that the best example is the UN, exactly what Martha said. The UN is imposing a framework, a thinking framework. If you are inside that thinking framework, you are good. If you are not in that thinking framework, you are not listened to. And we want to be just outside of the process. how do we do it? Do we do it with you? Do we do it with the Academy of Urbanism? Do we do it with the Nordic universities? Do we do it with Latin American institutions which are looking for a cultural alliance between Nordic cities, Baltic cities, Latin America, and through us and others? We have, these all are the things that we have to consider. I don't want to elaborate more because I have more to say, but just to say that we are losing space, we are losing a space for debate which is not meant to be either in the interest of the private sector, or the interest of a technical group, or the interest of a political or ideological group. And we are losing something, and if we don't react between ourselves, we will be totally isolated in a couple of years.
So there's a real opportunity maybe there in all of the chaotic situation around it for actual cities to be stepping up and saying, this is how we deliver, this is how we actually achieve things.
Together. So it's partnership and network.
Per-Arne and Mette, I don't quite agree with Christer that we don't have tools for implementation of the SDG, because if you look at the goals, for example, goal number 17 is about partnerships, and we have one that's about innovation. I think that these are two important goals to go further. And I also think that 1 year ago we had like a kickoff. There was some kickoff meetings for the SDG implementation in Sweden, and in this room our civil minister Ardalan Shekarabi was here, and he's responsible for the national implementation of the SDGs in Sweden. And his keyword was trust. In Swedish it was tillit. I don't know if that's exactly the same but he said that we have to have much more trust in our systems, how to work together and work with our organization, implement more trust in that to achieve the goals. And I think that that's one important remark in this toolbox for a new way of working with for implementing the sustainable development goals, I think.
Magda?
I'm just thinking very interesting what you said, Michael. I think it's very interesting. But I'm not sure if I fully agree, because I think this the networks that we need to build need to be more diverse. They need to include more different areas, different actors, different agents in society. We have to, and I think that the business sector is really important, because if we don't manage, and that's why I was talking about motifs, because if we don't manage to bring the business sector into the change that is needed, then we will be in conflict with business sector at all times. If we from a political level, for example, we be in constant battle with business sector, then that is where we will spend all the energy. If we find the way of cooperation, if we find the way where we can work together and find the solutions, then we can spend time and energy on innovation rather than on conflict. I think that's very important. But then there is another group missing, and that is of course the citizen, the people who this affects. And I think that's where we need, that's also why we come back to the cities, because at the city level we actually have a possibility to also include the citizen into the discussion. Again, citizens will not be a homogeneous group. They will have different opinions, they will not agree on everything. Some people will be very defensive of their own privileges, others will just want to benefit, but there is a very strong drive there that we need to look into. What we are working very hard on in Malmo now is trying to find a way, is how do we meet the initiatives that come from the citizens? How do we manage to take that drive, that inspiration, and that power that comes from small groups within a block or within an area, and how do we make that happen within the silos that you were talking about? This very destructive organization that we have that breaks down any innovation, any idea we have, because everything needs to be pushed into silo. How do we manage to do that? And that's where we come back to courage and risk, because the silos are there because we have given our civil servants and our organizations not only a task of delivering on the SDGs, but also on delivering on budget goals and on other objectives that we have set up. And we are presenting them with a terrible conflict of interest if we don't help them solve that. So when we have an initiative, we need to be able to say that, okay, this can cost, you can risk this money. You can do that. Do it outside the box. Do it outside the silos. And you are allowed to fail. And that's where we come back. If we don't have the courage to risk money and to say that this project is allowed to fail, then we can never learn anything, because any other option is pushing it into the silos and then the innovation is dead. And this is something that even big companies can't do this. This is very difficult. A few organizations have managed to do this, but now we need to manage it in our societies, in our cities, in our countries, in a global level, and we have to do it very quickly. So we need to risk. We need to risk standing in a business sector conference and saying very unpleasant things, saying things like half of your business models is going to die. You're going to start lose money on this and that. But if you can see that, you can also start to look into where you can actually make money. That we have to have that courage. Maybe we will not be invited again, but at least we will have been honest. And if we can't be honest, then how are we going to solve this problem?
So lots of people wanting the word on the stage, and maybe some of you have got comments from the audience as well. David, I was thinking you were talking before about, we know what we need. I mean, this is all around delivering. The SDGs is nothing different to what we normally do. Do we actually need to be talking? Do we just not need to get on with it? It's not rocket science solving a lot of these challenges, essentially.
I stick by my point. The Sustainable Development Goals are not something that any city would seriously disagree with. I think the disagreement comes to the next level down when you actually say, we're going to deal with housing by building on this green field, or by building social housing, or by doing this and this, and that's where you get the objections, and people go, oh no, I agree with the principle, but I don't agree with the reality, and we're cursed in a sense by words that no one would disagree with. Community, sustainability, resilience, all these things that you talk about, quality is another one, and everyone goes, oh, of course I agree with that, but they actually don't agree with what the implications are. Now, what I'm interested in, as I said before, are things that change on the ground, and I wouldn't be worried if I was Michelle to say that the UN is sort of sucking up these networks, because the UN doesn't do anything. The UN is a talking shop. The UN talks about goals and so on, which we all agree with anyway. Actually, cities are where the action is. I mean, I come from a country which has unfortunately voted to leave the European Union. Every city in the UK, with one exception, which is Birmingham, voted to stay. We have a set of cities in the UK which are much more linked into Europe than the rest of the country. And as Manchester, my city, which voted massively to stay in the European Union, we are now looking to European networks of cities to actually solve common problems and so on. Over lunch, we had Copenhagen, Malmo, Melbourne and Manchester sitting around a table talking about issues which are all common to our cities. And I think that's where the future is, because cities can actually change something.
So it's actually getting on, delivering, and then sharing the experience of that delivery. Yeah. So, Krista, then Michelle, and then Perona.
I think I was quite unclear before, because I do really think that it is the cities that will make it. So I absolutely believe that we have the tools. And what I said was that the nations and the global level has to give some power to the nations and do that as quickly as possible. Because we are coming back to when we are talking about partnership and so on. I mean, we have to create some kind of capacity for change. And that means that we also have to share some ideas and also have the same kind of sense of urgency. And that's really something that we need. And that also means that the market and the people, they will not buy things that aren't sustainable, for example. So that's why we have new business models. So as you say, Mette, the products that you are producing, they will be worthless in 5 years. So that kind of sense of urgency, because we are living in a totally new context.
If you're manufacturing diesel cars in Germany, that's maybe your business model has just collapsed. So it's very, very real issues that are at hand. Richard?
Just to be clear, and not to be misunderstood, I have nothing against the private sector. We are working with the private sector. What I'm saying that we are confronted with a situation with a lot of initiatives pop-ups, and those initiatives are biased. They are not like, I would say, us, that we have a kind of a ethical code of conduct, or at least we have a clear methodology by which we want to address the issues in a non-biased way. Now you have a series of partners which are claiming to represent current of thoughts or expertise, but they are biased in favor of one or several economic interests. That's the only thing what I'm saying. But otherwise, you are totally right, and we are doing it. We are doing it in our activities. We do work with the private sector, as long as the private sector understands that there are limits to what it can do, and it respects the autonomy and the political autonomy of the municipalities. They don't try to bias the situation. Saying that, the difficulties is to organize exactly the participation of all the actors, and a single association like ours, we have members in 60 countries, 3,000 members. We know only 1/3 of our members. We work with only 1/3 of our members. And some of them are very important, very significant cities with significant projects. So the question is, how can we engage through the momentum or the capacity that altogether we have to enlarge the scope and the geographical coverage of our membership in order to cover the different urban situations and take the best of expertise or experiences that exist within our networks and put it in a common framework so that we can share that expertise with a common understanding, a common vocabulary. In that respect, Sustainable Development Goals, the fantastic vocabulary system to learn what is urban development. Doesn't mean that they are right, but at least the vocabulary is quite interesting. So if we can use the same vocabulary, but go a step further in the recommendation, we would have done certainly some progress in that direction.
Please feel free to join the conversation. Barana?
Yes, I was thinking about this issue about partnership.